Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about X-Men Unlimited Infinity, Sunfire vs. Otherworld, written by Steve Orlando and Steve Fox. Now when it comes to this issue, it was a comic I was looking forward to, given the last time we saw Sunfire he was trapped in Otherworld with no clear exit at the end of issue 24 of X-Men. Which, on a side note, I did cover earlier on this channel. So with that said, this issue opens with Sunfire arriving in Otherworld just like how we saw right before the Hellfire Gala. Now just to add some context to the story, Shiro was tasked with finding Redroot and returning her back to Arakko. Because during the X of Swords event, Mad Jim Jaspers ended up taking her prisoner after she broke the rules of his cricket market during Saturnine's tournament. Now the thing you have to understand about Redroot is the reason why she is so important is because she has the ability to communicate with Arakko much like how Cypher is able to talk to Krakoa, and considering both nations are now at somewhat peace, Shiro must do what he can to bring her home. So with magic gone, Shiro quickly made his way into said market because according to him, this mission would be a quick grab and dash sort of thing. Now with Redroot life in Shiro's hands, he started to look high and low as he maneuvered through the food stands littering the streets. Now when it comes to the market itself, it is known to house all kinds of random creatures and individuals. Individuals that makes up the labyrinthine streets, noisy markets, lively pubs, and dark alleyways. So with potential danger around every corner, Shiro's first confrontation was just a few feet ahead of him. So with that said, one such native of the market bumped into Shiro on passing. So with a single bump, the fight was on. The Colossus individual took Shiro and lifted him into the air, with the full intention of knocking Sunfire out. But see, this person had no idea who he was dealing with, for Sunfire was about to heat things up, because this man was too stupid to know better than to play with fire. So with his mutant ability on full display, the poor man stood no chance against our hero. So with the fire heating up, the man quickly realized that he was dealing with a witchbreed. Now for those who are new to Otherworld, in Otherworld the witchbreed is a negative way to say mutant. So with that said, out of nowhere, the beggar on the corner snaps his fingers and turns the aggressor into a pile of flower petals, because an important rule was broken, which was no quarreling allowed in said market. So following that display of power, the beggar turned into the host of the market himself, Mad Jim Jaspers, and immediately he welcomed the Krakoan to his establishment. So with Jasper's identity known, Shiro spoke clearly and plain, and requested Redroot to be returned to his nation's custody, because like I said before, he was tasked with bringing her home. But see, little did Shiro know, his search wasn't going to end that fast, for Jim Jaspers no longer had Redroot in his possession. So with Redroot missing in action, Shiro had to come to terms that his search may last longer than he assumed. So with no clear direction to start his search, Jasper took Shiro by the hand and walked him to an alleyway, which was something he was not cool with at all. So with tension rising, Shiro made his attention known by once again flaring up his mutant ability. So with that out there, Jasper agreed to help Shiro find Redroot by placing a splinter in his hand that was designed to lead him to the mutant he sought. So as the pain ripped through Shiro's body, Jasper let out a laugh as he explained how it worked. Following that, Jasper proceeded to tell Shiro to consider the pain as payment for the fight he caused earlier, and to ensure that Shiro left with no further problems, Jasper opened a shortcut to help aid and kickstart Shiro's journey. So with the compass in hand, Shiro set off on his mission to bring Redroot home despite not knowing he had no means of return. So with that said, this issue comes to an end. Following the previous issue, we pick up in Otherworld's Untamed Wild, with a man who burned like the sun, for Shiro thought about what Storm told him back on Arakko, because he was dead set on seeing how far he could go. And because of that reason, he believed this quest was suited just for him. So as he overlooked the vast landscape before him, out of nowhere from the sky above, flying deadly fish rained down upon him with killing intent. So with Shiro barely able to dodge the first attack, he quickly realized things was about to get way worse, as a swarm of razor-toothed flying fish descended upon him for as far as the eye can see. So with his back against the wall, Shiro did what he did best, and turned up the heat, and within seconds his overwhelming blaze quickly eliminated all who threatened him. So with the creatures gone, Shiro quickly learned his lesson about letting his guard down. Now with the map in hand, Shiro did what he had to do, and endured the pain in order to locate Redroot. So with the toll paid and the blood shed, the silver embedded in his palm pointed true. But the path to Redroot snaked across the vast realm, drawing the wandering mutant toward dangers new and incomprehensible. But like a warrior, he kept fighting on, because to him those monsters meant nothing to him. So as the days passed, numerous creatures continued to creep up behind him unnoticed, but Sunfire's flame refused to dim under their constant attacks. So after many battles, Sunfire continued to march on, unyielding and unbeaten, as the harsh weeks grew into unforgiving months. And if Shiro was being honest, he knew not how much time had passed on Krakoa since he left, nor did he know if magic had attempted a rescue after he failed to appear at their meeting place. But one thing he knew for sure was his mission had to be completed, so as he approached the borders of Blightspoke, Shiro was driven by only one thought, and that was how he would not leave Otherworld without Redroot. Now when it comes to Blightspoke, it was a realm full of debris, because it was made up of fragments of countless lost worlds coalescing into an entirely new, uniquely inhospitable land, where very few could stand to dwell there at length, and for those who did paid a steep price. So as Shiro traveled the harsh desert, yet another creature sat in wait as it prepared to attack. And attack it did, because the creature launched a tentacle directly at Shiro, and before he knew it, the creature had him by his neck. Now Shiro knew the stark ivory figure at his back, despite the pitiable creature's corrupted form, for this creature was a summoner of immense. Now a summoner is a mutant sorcerer of immense power, and the reason why it is here is because back when Saturnine ruined Otherworld, she dispatched a fleet of summoners to Blightspoke as her agents in the realm. But unfortunately, Saturnine completely forgot about them and no longer rules them, so because of that, they all scattered to the wind. So with nowhere to go, a large portion pledged renewed fealty to Genesis, as some remained in Blightspoke. And while in that corrupted land, their bodies and minds began to warp due to its fetid soil. So with that said, we see one such summoner in all his corrupted glory preparing to fight. So with the fight on, Shiro blasted off several rounds of flaming hot fireballs, but due to its superior speed, it quickly dodged each attack. And with a grip and swing of its tentacle, it sent a giant rock crashing in Shiro's direction. So with great reflexes, Shiro ended up blasting it out the sky, like Goku from Dragon Ball Z. So with the rock being blasted into countless pieces, the fight continued. Now if Shiro had met this creature on equal footing, then Sunfire would be more than a match for the tainted summoner, but due to Shiro's journey, he was beaten and drained and fighting on his last leg. So with fatigue setting in, the summoner was able to catch him slipping and was inches from sealing the deal when a hold was blasted straight through its body, killing it instantly. So with Shiro completely shocked, he turned and looked for the source of the strike, and at that moment he saw a woman standing in watch on the cliff behind him. Now just because the Blightspoke is dangerous doesn't mean it is without any protector, for the entire realm wasn't lawless. For even a place like Blightspoke had a sheriff. So with that said, this issue of Marvel Unlimited Infinity comes to an end. This issue opens with Sheriff Giada Whitechapel introducing herself to Shiro after the previous issue's events. Because just in case you forgot what happened, Shiro was attacked by a corrupted summoner, and because of his constant traveling, he was too tired to fight it off. So the good old sheriff had to interfere and handle the fight herself. So with that all out there, Shiro immediately thanked her for her help by bowing several times. So with the thank yous out the way, the sheriff then went on to tell him that she is pretty fond of mutants and she got a good read off of him. So following that, the sheriff got on her horse and proceeded to tell Shiro how her home isn't the best and is extremely unhospitable. So with the warning delivered, Shiro and the sheriff started to take off to her base of operations. But while they traveled, she continued to say ever since Saturnine turned tail on Otherworld, they all have been left to deal with feral summoners and all sorts of untamed threats. So following that, we transition over to her base of operation where she introduced Shiro to a teammate of hers by the name of Oso, and on a side note he reminds me of the Kanye West bear. But anyway, Shiro goes on to tell her that her fortress is impressive. And that is when Sheriff Whitechapel goes on to say that her base used to be a Blightspoke refinery until Betsy Braddock and her team came in and helped liberate it, and Knights of X issue number 2. Now with that out there, Shiro, out of nowhere, doubles over in pain as the effects of Blightspoke start to affect him. Because as we all know, Blightspoke can cancel out mutant gifts, so the more Blightspoke out of circulation, the better. And considering this place used to be a refinery of the product, it is only logical that most mutants can't spend too much time there. And because of that, we discovered that Orchis has been operating out of Blightspoke. And not only have they been operating here, but they also have been using mutants to mine it, which caused a huge turnover rate. So following that bombshell, Sheriff Whitechapel went on to tell Shiro how Orchis moved their base of operations just over the horizon to a distillery turned fortress in order to mine a newly discovered cache. And a little while ago, Whitechapel and her team attempted to take the site out, because to the best of their knowledge, Orchis's defenses were geared towards rogue summoners and wild creatures, not someone like them. But when they arrived at the battle site, they found out that they were dead wrong, as a sentinel arrived on the scene and started to put in crazy work. And following that day, Whitechapel and her team stayed away from that arena ever since, because as you may have guessed, they lost a lot of people that day. So with that out there, Shiro looked down at the splinter in his hand, only to see that it had turned its eyes towards the fortress, which meant that would be his next stop and hopefully his last. Now with Shiro's mind made up, the sheriff proceeded to tell our hero how she feels sorry for both him and Redroot if they have to get involved with that place. So just as she was wishing Shiro luck, Oso let out a warning and quickly pushed her out of the way as a sentinel popped up and opened fire. And just like that, Oso was consumed by the blast. So with the sentinel at their doorstep due to the X gene being detected, it did what it was programmed to do and started to neutralize the target. So with the sentinel preparing its next attack, both Shiro and Sheriff Whitechapel launched their attack. So with the fight on, Shiro burst into flames and dashed towards the metal monster in an attempt to take it out. So with Shiro willing to fight, Whitechapel quickly grabbed Oso and snuck away to leave Shiro to his fate. So with the two powerhouses clashing together, Shiro proceeded to turn up the heat as he went straight to the core of the Iron Giant. And during an intense struggle, to my surprise, Shiro was consumed by the blast and sent flying into the ground below. So with our hero dead to rights, the sentinel reached down and took our Shiro prisoner, because at the very last moment, he was redirected to retrieve the target instead of killing him. So as Shiro lay defeated, the last thing he saw was the sheriff and her men taking to the sky and getting out of dodge, which was all good in his book. So as everything faded to black, an undisclosed amount of time went by, as a voice woke an extremely battle-damaged Shiro. And to his surprise, the woman before him was none other than Moira herself, the traitor to mutant kind. So with that shocking ending, this issue comes to an end. So following the last events of the previous issue, we pick up in the Orchis Blightspoke Outpost with Moira standing before a beaten Shiro surrounded by armed Orchis guards. And at this point in the story, Moira had our hero dead to rights and completely under her control, so with no way to fight back, the guards place an inhibitor collar around his neck, because as you may have guessed, Orchis couldn't risk Shiro torching their fine distillery to the ground, so with Shiro's ability gone, one of the guards proceeded to pull out a syringe filled with Blightswell to prepare an injection, but right before he could do it, to my surprise, Moira stopped him. Now according to her, the reason why she did it was because in her words, mutants still had their uses. Because then she goes on to say, in one of her past lives she watched him burn as fuel for centuries, and if she was a betting woman, she believed they could top that. So with the traitor of Krakoa just inches away from Shiro, Shiro with all his might sent a thunderous headbutt straight into Moira's head because our hero would sooner die than serve Orchis. So with a fight breaking out, the Orchis guard pulled his weapon, but before he could use it, Shiro delivered yet another thunderous elbow to the side of his face, and with great timing, Shiro managed to take said guard's weapons. So with gun in hand, Shiro wasted no time in turning on Moira and yelled out how Orchis would never succeed, not while there even one X-Men breathing. So with the trigger pulled, Moira and all her cybernetic enhancements effortlessly dodged each shot and came face to face with our hero with blinding speed. So with Shiro being outclassed, Moira drops a bombshell on him by saying she could tell he has been trekking across Otherworld for a long time because all the X-Men are dead and gone. So with her robotic strength, Moira crushed the weapon in his hand before lifting him off his feet. And once she had him in the air, Moira continued to tell him how Orchis already had won, while Krakoa had already fallen. So according to Moira, Krakoa as a nation and as a people has already drawn its final breath. So with the news broken to Shiro, he refuses to believe it. But that is when Moira, once again, doubled down by saying she bet he would love to believe that his people had survived because it would at least take the sting out of not being there while his species went extinct. So with that said, Moira took the beaten Shiro and sent him crashing into the floor and into the level below. Now with heavy damage dealt to Shiro, Moira proceeded to give him the quote-unquote VIP tour of the facility by first introducing him to the brewmaster. Now she then goes on to say that his job is to refine the Blightspoke's raw material into a nasty weapon. Now before that was a lot of work to do, but see, that is where Shiro as her prisoner will come in handy, because with him, they can automate the factory a lot easier. Because up to this point, according to Moira, things had been really tight because they had been burning through their batteries like crazy. So with the summoner removed, the worker tossed his body into a pile of remains, because Moira prides herself on being a zero-waste facility. Because Moira has been using the corpses of the dead as a fertilizer. Because this fertilizer was used for none other than Redroot herself. Now, Moira then goes on to say how Redroot is vital to their operation, because she has the ability to grow the ingredients needed to run this whole show. And through a lot of poking and torture, Orchis was able to make Redroot churn the soil with her roots. So with Redroot before Shiro, an uneasy silence overcame him as rage started to build within him. Because Shiro had faced unimaginable dangers to find Redroot. And to his dismay, he found her standing before him, withered but clinging to some spark of life. But if what Moira had said held truth, then Shiro had failed, and as for his quest to recover Redroot for the twin mutant homelands of Krakoa and Arako, was pointless if the mutants who called those places home no longer existed. So with an ironclad determination, Shiro took the splinter out of his hand and quickly picked the collar around his neck. Because Shiro had known failure many times before, and being brought low had never deterred him from getting back up. So as the guards went to take him in, the collar dropped from his neck, and just like that, Shiro's past words began to reign true, for as long as even one mutant still stood, there would still be an ember of hope for the future. And just like that, the fire deep within Shiro came to life, and even the smallest spark could ignite an inferno. So following part 4 epic conclusion, we pick up with a furious Shiro ready to take out all before him. And just how fate would have it, this issue opens with just that. Because the last words the Orchis soldiers spoke before being turned into ash were, "Long live Orchis," but if Shiro had something to say about it, it wouldn't be too long. So as the fire burned on, Moira stood ready to face the mutant before her, but before the fight could start in earnest, she informed him that she tried to put on her happy face and kill him with kindness. But she sees now that such pleasantries won't deter him. So because of that, she sees no choice but to get rough. And just like that, she revealed her true self and geared up for battle. But see, no matter the danger before him, Shiro was not about to back down, for he came to Otherworld to serve Arako and Krakoa, and that was what he intended to do, even if Moira claimed mutant kind had fallen in his absence. And despite hearing that his people were slaughtered at the hands of her perverse alliance, Shiro would not go quietly into the night. And with those words, as Shiro's flames warmed Redroot of the forest, she started to feel something she'd not dared to feel since coming to Otherworld. She started to feel hope. Because Shiro goes on to say that Moira mock and taunt him because she believes that telling him about his people's death would break his will to live, his will to fight. But instead of doing that, it only managed to turn him into an avenger. And just like that, he flew straight into the fight, sending a fire fist straight to her face, and a volcanic-class eruption. So with Moira taking the shot at point-blank range, she was sent flying into a vat of Blightswell. Now, as we all know, Moira is no pushover, so almost instantly she returned to her feet and prepared for round 2, but before she could respond in kind, the Brewmaster started to freak out about the condition of his lab and grabbed a pipe and ran into battle. So with the Brewmaster in full charge, Moira yelled out for him to stop, but her warnings fell on deaf ears. Because as of the last issue, we discovered that the Brewmaster is the only person who could create the Blightswell, which makes him a very important asset for Orchis to have. And luckily for the VIP tour, Shiro knows it too, so with no time to waste, our hero sends another fire fist into the head of the Brewmaster, killing him dead on the spot. So as the body burned, Shiro reminds them that this is war, and while in war there is little art in a quick death, but a quick death can provide mercy. Now with the Brewmaster down for the count, Shiro dropped to one knee, for that attack took a lot out of him. So with that stuff put to an end, Moira goes on to say they have plenty of Blightswell already refined, in fact, more than enough for the pittance of mutants left on Earth. So with things heating up, Moira calls out for the technician in the corner to clear out everything he could, including the withering old twig in the corner, referring to Redroot. So with a slight twitch from Shiro, Moira immediately knew that Redroot was his goal, so with that information in hand, she dashed towards the helpless mutant, and with no hesitation, she proceeded to cut her down with her blade. So with Redroot badly hurt, Moira reached down and picked her up, and asked why was Redroot so important to him. But blinded by his end goal, Shiro mustered up all his strength and ran head first to save the weakened mutant, and in a turn of events, Moira jabbed Redroot into his chest like a blade into the heart. So with blood raining out, our hero stood shocked by the turn of events. So following part 4 we transition over to part 5, with Shiro spitting out blood with Redroot embedded into his body. So with that said, Moira also goes on to tell him that Arako is most likely leveled due to Genesis's war, so even if he did get Redroot out of there, where would they even go? Now this was not how Shiro envisioned rescuing the wayward mutant known as Redroot. But he will not give up his quest, because he knows deep down, he couldn't even if he wanted to, because if even one ember of hope remained, he had a job to complete. So with yet another display of his resilient nature, Shiro lifted his head and said that he once heard whispers that she was once the secret heart beating in the center of Krakoa. But unfortunately, as a heart, she grew tumorous and cancerous and started to spread like rot. But see, at the end of the day Shiro does not know what has transpired on Earth since he came to Otherworld, but he does know his heart holds no such corruption. Because he came for Redroot, and no one, even Moira, will stand in his way. So with Shiro returning to his feet, Moira looks at him in disdain as she tells him that he is no threat to her because he could barely stand as it is. But see, that never stopped Shiro before, because with a smile on his face, he ignited his fire one more time and took off into the air with Redroot in his chest. So with Shiro crashing through the roof, Moira tells him to run all he wants, but only a cold death awaits him in the shadows. So with our hero gone, Moira yells for her subordinates to get Devo on the line if they want to live, because with the most recent turn of events, even Moira realizes that they will need a new source of Blightswell. So with the battle over for now, a badly beaten Shiro exited the facility and flew as far as his body would take him, because Moira's threats were not idle. Because Shiro's final exertion took its toll on his body. And if not for Blightspoke's strange gravity, Shiro would have plummeted to his death and taken Redroot with him, but instead, they drifted and Shiro slipped in and out of consciousness as Otherworld's peculiar rhythms continued unabated. Now, for those who live their lives within the realm, often find that its dangers only serve to highlight its joys, but as for the interlopers, they are reminded that nothing comes easily inside the Otherworld's borders, because underestimating Shiro has set Orchis back tremendously. So with all that done, for those few who've managed to seize power, those people never miss an opportunity to tighten their grip on it. And one such person was Jim Jaspers, because on the next page, we see him walking out of a portal ready to reclaim a gift that he gave, the splinter from Shiro's hand. So with that done, our hero Shiro awoke to find himself in a cold dark corner of the realm. Now he wandered through the void for what felt like an eternity as his flames dimmed with every step. It was so bad that he considered briefly that he was in hell, but see, Shiro had been through hell numerous times. Hell of manipulation, of disappointment, of loss of control, hell of self-inflicted torments and of pains forced upon him by others. But see, since Shiro joined the X-Men of Krakoa, since he became an adopted son of Arako, something deep down had changed. Shiro's heart no longer beats for him alone, but instead for everyone around him. So with the creature slain, Shiro thinks back on a conversation he had with Storm, because he once told the Regent that he wanted to see how far he could go, and because of his determination, he still hasn't reached that limit, because deep down he knows he still have farther yet to travel. So as the snow swirled around them, Shiro apologized to Redroot and told her one day his flame would burn out forever, but he promised, better yet he vowed, he would hold back the dark for as long as he could. And with that said, Shiro and Redroot continued their journey as their time in X-Men Unlimited Infinity Comics comes to an end, and as for the conclusion of the Otherworld arc, that will pick up in X-Men issue number 28, bro. So with that said, this issue opens up with a small recap of what Shiro had to go through during his time in Otherworld, and on a side note, they more or less got the basics of it right, with one major exception that they must have retconned for this issue. Because in X-Men Unlimited Infinity, they explore how Redroot was embedded into his chest. Basically, during a battle with Moira in a Blightswell facility, she used Redroot as a knife to stab him with after he took out the Brewmaster. But following that event, we also see how Shiro and Redroot both slowly start to die inside due to their unusual situation. But one thing about Shiro you need to understand is that if he made a promise to bring Redroot home, then that is exactly what he would do no matter the cost. So as he continued his exploration through Otherworld, he discovered that the Krakoan gateways had been closed for reasons that Shiro didn't understand and frankly didn't want to think about. So as his body grew weaker, he gambled on a way home through an unsavory individual, but once they arrived, Shiro quickly realized that it was a trap and chose to continue on. So with yet another door closed, Shiro thought back to when he first joined the X-Men, because on that day he told the team he was ready to serve someone other than himself. But in this chaotic place, his word was put to the test, and here, in Otherworld, Shiro would find out if his destiny really was to serve. So the mutant with the heart of a nuclear engine descended into the void and walked for days with his responsibility stacked close to his heart. He forced himself so much that he eventually became lost, and all his strength left his bones as the cold threatened to overcome him. So with his body beaten and his will fading, Shiro reaches into his own chest and removed Redroot with a single motion as blood erupts on the snow. As the mutant of the sun lay dying on the ground, all he could do was issue an apology to the one he promised to protect, for in his eyes he had not only failed Redroot, but he had also failed Arako as well as himself. So as Shiro's eyes begin to close, a voice calls out in the distance saying, "What is the end, my child, if not the beginning?" Because the last seed of Okara needs but one thing to grow, and that is mutant blood. For in Revelation's eyes, the magic has led Shiro right to his side once more. So in a display of power, Revelation healed the broken Shiro and told him to prepare himself, for they must march to war. And on a side note, this page looks amazing, and I love how Shiro is back in the mainline comics. So with that said, this story of Shiro's journey comes to an end. Now with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.